Cyphers. We used to be called sorcerers, a rare breed of being that could wield mind-controlling powers. In reality, we could control electrical impulses, but we didn't come into our own until the first real computers were invented. Then we became tech gods. While we are still at an advantage to most, even those days are past now. Now, we're a curiosity in a world where tech bridges all the gaps and has mostly replaced magic. My name's Ulf Whitlock. I'm one of a small number of people who has inherited the powers of the Cyphers. I'm also a hunter. I track down criminals for the government and that juicy paycheck. I even have my own badge. I take on all types. Orcs, elves, goblins. Shoot first, ask questions maybe. That's how Dad did it, it's how his dad did it, and I'm one for tradition. Welcome to the world of cybernetics and the punk. To my world of magic, blood, sweat and steel. Welcome to the Cyphers Edge. I was not a fan of being lost, being in the dark, or being followed. Contrary to what people thought due to movies and TV, sewers were not just huge pipes you could walk around in and pop up wherever you'd like. Especially in a city that was rebuilt on what was mostly old city. Half the time I was navigating old buildings and flooded basements. I'd been down here for 2 hours. 2 fucking hours. Tracking a rogue vampire. You know you're being followed, right? Here's helpful facts, ever present through our comlink. I thought as much. I glanced over my shoulder and saw nothing. How many? Her voice crackled. The depth I'd gone to was affecting the signal. I was surprised she was getting anything off the mini scanners I'd stuck to the walls behind me as I'd sloshed my way through the soggy maze. Partly to watch my back, partly to help me find my way out. 3, I think. There's other signals further deeper down, but they're weak. Probably animals and bums. You want to hope so. I progressed a few more slow meters. I could have come with you. I could just make out her voice over the static. That's a bad idea, if ever I heard one. No one would know if I wolfed out down there. I could hear the pout despite the bad signal. You know, if anyone ever found out that you willingly shifted, you'd be in the shit. I looked down at my legs, to where they disappeared into the murky water. Much like I'm in right now. Fia had offered to come along before I'd left. She was immune to vampire bites due to her lycanthropy. It was too risky though, not for her as such, but it was against the law for her to change shape of her own free will. This was mostly due to where she ranked personally on the threat level of sentient predatory creatures. She said something else I couldn't quite make out. Fia. I took a few steps back the way I'd come, but it was no good. The line went dead. I was on my own. Swell. Just swell. Now I was definitely alone down here, being tracked by feral bloodsuckers. When I was in the service, we used to run training missions like this. I was somewhat prepared for the situation. Unfortunately, the preparation had meant that I knew some of the habits of vampires. Vampires were very binary. They were either the type to form a clan or the type to go full lone wolf. I had thought, after a week of researching my mark, that he was the solo kind of guy. I would have bet good money on it. All of a sudden, I felt like I'd made a very big mistake. The mark had been causing a lot of grief in the streets above, and I'd rushed this mission along to try and stem the flow of blood. Right now, I was considering turning back and coming back down here with more bullets. But I was kind of lost without Fia's guidance. Besides, I was here now, I may as well make the most of it. I trudged through the mixture of rain, runoff and shit. The smell was exactly as you'd expect. There was no amount of scrubbing that was going to shift it from my skin in a hurry. I scanned the tunnel with my other sight. A body flitted across the junction further up. I turned to look behind me and could make out 2 points of light, energy signatures further back. I was wrong about the lone wolf thing, and I was walking into a trap. The majority of vampires were upstanding citizens, controlling their thirst with either fake blood or by having thralls, people who volunteered to donate blood in return for one day becoming a vampire. Every now and then one went feral though. That was how the hunt had started. The problem with feral vamps was that the crazy was catching. If a sire was off the rails, it would 9 times out of 10 transfer to whoever they had turned, like a virus within a virus. I had not been expecting 3 vampires down here. I had not come equipped for that. It was understandably putting me on edge, so I gripped my pistol tightly for what comfort it offered. I only had 10 rounds of blessed silver in there. On top of that, it was either shoot them through the heart or through the head, or decapitation. That was always an option. I lifted the hilt of my sword off my belt. I felt the balance of weight change as the blade slid free. There was also my latest upgrade, and through my fear there was an eager sense of anticipation that wanted to have a chance to use it. I decided to push my luck. I was sick of trudging through the shit. I called out into the dark, hoping to provoke an attack. Varish, don't be scared, mates. I won't hurt you. Much. The sound of footsteps in the slush, another sighting of a vampire flitting through the shadows. One thing we have in common, Mr. Hunter. A voice came back from the dark. It was sickly and frantic. I won't hurt you much either. You'll be dead after the first bite. Delightful. I continued to wade through the slurry in the almost pitch black until I reached the intersection of tunnels up ahead. I made out vague shapes in the dim light, given off by the energy signatures all around us. Power conduits and weak data signals caused real-world objects to appear in a ghostly fashion in my sight. This was a 3-tunnel junction. The fourth side was a raised platform with stairs that led up to the surface. The platform was large, blankets and boxes scattered around it. They were nesting here, and it was a big nest. I hoped against hope it was only the 3. You might be the hunter in name, but I am a hunter by nature. The voice seemed to come from all over. Despite my years of training and experience, it sent shivers up my back. I waded to the nest, climbing up onto the platform and ripped a flare from my belt. Tearing the cap off, I threw it down amongst the bedding. Everything burst into flames within seconds. The flare spun slowly on the spot, spraying pink flames around the platform. I jumped back down into the water, my figure silhouetted by the fires behind me, the junction around me illuminated. Vampires could see in the dark, just like werewolves. Elves had decent vision in the dark. Half-elves, not so much. Come on then, I yelled into the pitch black. It's been at least 2 days since you fed. Come and get some. 3 figures approached me, 1 from each tunnel. I could hear the snarls. It did something primal to your skin and sent shivers up your spine. I raised my pistol and sighted down the tunnel directly ahead. Just how fast are you? I squeezed the trigger. All 3 moved at an incredible speed. I spun, firing off one shot after another. I saw small sprays of blood hanging independent in the air. I knew I was hitting them, just not where I wanted to. I pivoted, trying to pin one down, shot after shot, missing the mark. 4 shots left, and I was impacted from the side, thrown into the heinous fluids at my feet. Claws sunk into my shoulder, lifting me back up. I was ripped from the water, for want of a better word, and held in midair. As I gasped for breath, I saw 2 points of red light. The eyes of a vampire were inches from me, about to feed. Just the one, though. My arm whipped around and I planted the barrel of my gun against its temple and put the 7th bullet straight into its head. The claws released from my shoulder. I got to my feet and the body dropped to the tunnel floor, sinking into the muck. I spat the foul, odorous water from my mouth. That was reckless. I thought you were team players. Oops. I didn't even see where they came from. Blows coming in from all sides as the remaining 2 descended on me, punches to my head, to my torso. They were running past me, fists extended out wide. It was like they were trying to tenderize me. I tried to strike with my sword, slashing wildly at my attackers. It was futile. They tore it from my grip as they rushed past me and it spun off into the dark. I knew vampires didn't like to waste blood. They wouldn't use their claws until they had to. If they started slashing, food would just go down the drain. Taking a blow to my leg, I fell to one knee. The barrage ceased for a moment. Cold laughter from one of the vampires. Varish stepped from the shadows. He was gaunt, tatty long hair that had once been blonde, and pale skin. A crazy grin on his face. The 4 front teeth sharp like razors, sandwiched between 2 spear-like canines. He snarled. His friends stepped closer too, wary, but I could feel the impatience and the hunger radiating off them. If I could have, I would have hacked them, short-circuited their augments. Of course, I had found the only vampires with little to no mods. My usual tricks wouldn't fly here. They burst into action again. A new flurry of blows fell on me. I popped one of my shields and hunkered down, taking what blows I could, waiting for the opportune moment. I only had 3 bullets left. Timing was going to be everything. The punches began to slow, the gaps between the beats lengthening as they started to tire. Vampires were fast, but they weren't overly strong. They were bred for stalking and short, sharp attacks, not prolonged fights. Starting to get a little bit tired, are we? I taunted. Varish paused ahead of me. He grinned menacingly. Still faster than you. I snorted and laughed. I guess that was my cue. He crouched, ready to strike me front on. I winked at him. The world around me slowed as my mind and body sped up and the new Hermes unit kicked in. I felt the lapping of the tiny waves of liquid cease their rhythm. The sweat and the water that dripped from Varish's hair almost slowed to a halt. The second vampire, a woman with what might have once been a pretty face, took a now glacial step towards me. Her body led the way ahead of her feet, her arms outstretched, ready to strike. I got up from my crouching position, then took 2 steps towards her. The waters didn't even have time to close behind me as I advanced on her. My footsteps left as craters in the rank fluid. I raised the gun to her forehead and pulled the trigger. Before she had even realized she was dead, I was moving to Varish. His face was distorted, a look of confidence inching towards horror. By the time I got to him, I could hear the scream building deep within him. I leveled the gun at his chest, and the holy bullet punched a hole in the front and out the back with a beautiful rose of blood. Time snapped back like temporal whiplash as I regained my true state. I went from feeling like smoke in the wind to lead in the water. Varish dropped to his knees, his lips trying to form something. Some last words, perhaps, a plea. I bent over, leaning close to his head, and whispered in his ear as I pressed the gun to his temple. 1 bullet left. Apparently not. Thea had been complaining about the smell for 2 hours. I'd showered 4 times. It just wasn't coming out. I could go downstairs and put my head in Mrs. Chen's jar of chili powder, and I'd still smell you, she said from inside her room. You're a werewolf, I objected from the bathroom. You can smell that it's fucking Tuesday. There was a pause. Wolf, it's Friday. I stuck my head around the doorframe. See what I mean? It doesn't matter how much I wash. You'll still smell me. I don't smell days of the week, she shot back. It's called temporal awareness, moron. I stepped out of the bathroom again, towel wrapped around my waist, hair pulled back in a tight tail. The lines of augmentation surgery and bioorganic metal components formed a symmetrical pattern over my body. Okay then, I said. Answer honestly. When I say Friday, what smells come to your mind? She didn't answer straight away, considering how she could screw me on the answer while not playing down her abilities. In the end, she poked her head around the doorframe to her open bedroom. Friday smells like rubbish collection, date night perfume, and curry night upstairs, she trailed off begrudgingly. I mimed a finger gun at her while cracking an iced coffee. Bullseye. She emerged from her room, dressed in her trademark loose tracksuit, waving a hand in front of her face. The overacting stank worse than I did, in my opinion. I don't smell days of the week. I smell things that happen on that day. You say tomato, I say tomato. We settled into our daily routine. Since I'd wrapped our current job, Fia sat down to watch some old anime. I inspected the fridge and decided that tonight was a takeaway night. As I closed the fridge door, Fia spoke up. You know, I can also smell into the future. Really? I asked skeptically. Yeah. She didn't take her eyes off the screen. Today I smell pizza and hot wings. I thought about it. It was early. The sun wasn't going down for a little while yet. Get your shoes on, I said. She looked up from her show, surprised. You're not making me go get it, are you? She whined like a teenager. I don't do food delivery. No, we're going to the Brass Knuckles. They have pizza and wings. Fia grimaced. I knew she wasn't comfortable going out even during the day, but she'd been in here for weeks. Even she needed time in the sun. They also have those elf chicks serving at the bar. You know, the ones you like to flirt with. She pretended to consider, but I knew it was enough to tip her over the edge. Okay, but I don't want to talk to Shaky. You're on your own there. I started to get dressed in my room while continuing the conversation. He's not that bad, you know. He creeps me out. I could hear her digging through her room looking for clean socks, probably. Yeah, he kinda does. I emerged from my room and opened the front door. Fia stepped out of her room in jeans, a very old AC/DC t-shirt, and a sleeveless leather vest. I raised both eyebrows. What? She looked embarrassed. If I'm going out, I want to look presentable. Uh-huh, I said skeptically. I'm sure it's got nothing to do with the bar babes. She gave me a finger and marched to the door. Before she stepped through the hallway, she turned and looked behind her, as though she was checking to see if she'd forgotten something. We'll be back soon, right? She said, anxiety leaking into her voice. I nodded. Of course. Even at this time in the afternoon, the Brass Knuckles was pumping out music and beer. The dancers were absent from the hanging cages this early, but the girls behind the bar were enough to cool the mind and warm the blood. The wide open space was packed with all sorts: elves, orcs, gnomes, goblins. There was even a few more obscure races I noticed mixed into the crowd. I looked over my shoulder to Fia, who looked like she wanted to shrink into her own torso. Come on, I grabbed her by the arm and dragged her in, pushing my way through the crowd to get to the polished timber and brass bar. I pulled across a recently vacated stool, almost lifting her up onto it. Sit. Stay. She shot me a dirty look. I deserved that. She got comfortable and looked over the crowd around the bar. I could see her nostrils twitching. Her ears must have been having a field day with all the noises. This was probably a sensory overload for her, like me opening up my other sight in a server room. I waved over a bartender, a tall, slender she-elf with long black hair, a white singlet, and denim short shorts. I recognized her and hazarded a guess on her name. Hey, Thea, right? I asked, and she nodded. This is my sister, I said over the noise. She eats like a trucker, so I want hot wings until she passes out. Thea smacked me over the back of the head, hard, and I flinched as the server laughed. I need to speak to Shaky, I said, rubbing the back of my head. Is he out the back? Thea nodded. I'm pretty sure. Her voice was smooth like silk. See if Jasper will let you through. I patted Fia on the back and made my way to the door that led to the back of the bar and out to the storerooms and Shaky's office. A large, muscular orc stood there, just behind the bar, between me and the door. He was dressed in torn denim pants, a muscle shirt, and sporting some classic military boots. He looked down at me through smoky sunglasses, despite being inside. I smiled up at him. Jasper, how's it hanging? He smiled back. Jasper was one of the toughest bare-knuckle boxers in the city. He'd won a bunch of underground prize fights, and when not in the ring, he was a bouncer here for Shaky. Shaky was the one who had found him and paid for him to make his way into the ring. Most people knew that. What people didn't know was that when he wasn't redecorating the ring with shades of red, he was a giant teddy bear. Oof! How's it going, bro? It's been a while. It has, mate. How's the boxing going? He shrugged and flexed his chrome-plated arms. Getting more action, eh? Got me some new arms. I gave them an appraising look, letting him see how impressed I was. I can see myself in your bicep. Very shiny. I know. Goes with my smile. He grinned and displayed chrome-plated teeth and tusks. I had to admit it. On him, it looked good. I want to have a word with Shaky. Is he available? Jasper held up a finger and looked straight ahead. I couldn't see his eyes, but I would have bet he was calling in my request straight to the little green menace. After a minute, he nodded. He's just with someone at the moment, won't be long. I stayed to talk to Jasper while we waited, swapping stories and talking about fights. Actually, I've been meaning to call you, he said as there was a lull in the music. Really? About what? He opened his mouth to reply, then paused mid-breath. Ah, it can wait. He's free. He stepped aside and I squeezed past him, then opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The door closed behind me and the noise was almost completely cut off. The door was insulated and reinforced. Shaky had made enemies, but he wasn't stupid. This wasn't just a club, it was a fortress if he wanted it to be. As I made my way to the office door, two elves emerged. Both dressed in neat suits, they looked like they belonged to some high-rise office, not a dodgy club. I nodded to them as they passed, and they ignored me. Shaky's office door was open, but I knocked anyway before entering. The first thing a lot of people noticed when they entered Shaky's office was the lack of any hired muscle. For someone that had made a lot of enemies in the city, as he had carved his way into a position of power, he never surrounded himself with bodyguards. Jasper was one of the few he trusted, but even he was more for show. Shaky could hold his own, a fact that many of the gangsters and mobsters in the city learnt the hard way. The goblin was seated behind his desk like a king of a castle. If you were stupid, you would think that he was your run-of-the-mill goblin, but under that sharp suit and slick black hair, he was more deadly than I was, and less discerning. "Shaky, the club's hopping already. Good to see." I pulled up one of the very comfortable leather high-back chairs that faced the desk.
"Ah, Ulf, how was your hunt for the bloodsucker? Survived, I see."
"Yeah, sorry if you were taking bets the other way." The evil-eyed creature grinned wide, showing pointy teeth.
"If I was taking bets against you, I wouldn't have sold you those silver bullets."
I inclined my head to him. "Thanks for getting those for me on such short notice, by the way." He made a casual gesture as though it was nothing. To him, it probably was. Just a click of his fingers, no second thought.
"I understand how important it is to strike while the iron's hot. Government requisitions take an age."
I nodded along. "They do at that." He reached into his desk drawer and grabbed a long, rich-looking cigar.
"So, you come by to say thank you?"
He bit the end off, placed it between his thin, cracked lips, and snapped his fingers. Sparks flew from his fingertips. It ignited gas that issued from the hole in his palm. A small orange pilot light hovered over his hand, and he lit the cigar. I had never seen him do that before. "That's new." He grinned and blew out a cloud of smoke.
"It is, but it's still not what you came here for,"
he said, pushing the subject aside expertly. I did want to say thanks, but the intel I got along with those bullets was wonky. He wasn't alone. Shaky shrugged.
"I just pass on what I hear."
I grimaced. I couldn't really hold it against him. He was right. Yeah, well, it was a close thing. He blew a smoke ring.
"How many were there, out of interest?"
3 in total. He squinted at me.
3?
I nodded. He thought about it for a moment.
"With the missing persons reports and attacks, he must have taken at least 8 victims. Why only turn 2 of them? Usually the ones presiding in a group dwelling, they'll build a tribe of followers, not just a couple."
I leant back. How big do clans typically get? He took a long drag, thinking about it.
"Depends. I know not all ferals live in clans, but nearly all clans are feral, if you get my meaning. Something about the virus, I'm told. Clan dwellers are more predisposed to losing their shit."
I was actually surprised at his depth of knowledge. "Since when did you become an expert?" He blew out another smoke ring.
"I considered using vamps as thugs for a short while, but they're too unpredictable."
He pointed at me with the cigar.
"You're lucky, boyo."
"I'll go hit up a casino while I can then." There was a pause in the conversation as he enjoyed his cigar, a companionable silence. Then Shaky broke it.
"I noticed you dragged your sister down here."
He dropped the comment out of nowhere.
"Is that wise, this time of day?"
I gave him my best icy look. He just smiled back at me and took another long drag on the cigar. "She's in control."
"You better hope so,"
he said, raising his eyebrows. I got up from my chair and made to leave.
"She's a good kid. Don't get me wrong, I like her, but it's probably best if she heads home soon."
I didn't turn around. "I'll keep her out of trouble."
"Do me a favor and do it away from here."
I gritted my teeth and gripped the doorknob.
"Tell you what, bring him back for a lunchtime buffet, on me. We do good chili prawns."
I stepped out and closed the door behind me, letting out a tense breath. As I ran to the bar, I looked to where Fia sat. She was still there, a plate of hotwings in front of her, mostly eaten, and she was flirting awkwardly with Thea. The she-elf was laughing and tossed her hair over her shoulder. I gave Jasper a pat on the shoulder and pushed past to get back to the crowded bar. He laid a hand on my shoulder and I turned back to meet his eyes. "Got a sec?" he said in a more quiet voice than before. I nodded. "Yeah, I got a couple." There was a moment where he looked like he was going to think better of it. Then he pushed ahead. There's a filly who's been poking around, asking questions at the outlying clubs. I didn't know why, but in orc culture, males were bulls, females were fillies. No other race did this, it was just a quirk. He continued. She's been asking about a hunter with a white streak in his hair. My eyes looked up to the long white forelock that had just found its way loose to the rest of my hair. He raised an eyebrow and nodded. Got a name? I asked. He shook his head. No, but if she comes in here, I'll find out and hit you up. Thanks. He slapped a huge palm on my shoulder, and I turned back to push my way through the crowd. I reached Fear and checked the time on my heads-up display. Shaky was right. It probably was pushing it a bit close. I looked to her. She was laughing, finally letting her guard down with someone. It was good to see her happy again, for the first time in a long while. I could give her another 20 minutes. I owed her that. And besides, she'd been very much in control lately. She was getting better at holding the beast inside. Even the times that she had changed, she had been keeping her cool. To be fair, it was easy to keep calm when there was no external stimuli, just an empty room and no loud noises. But still, it was progress. She saw me standing by the bar and called out to me over the music. The beat of the music boomed in the air and everybody was dancing as one. The room thrummed. It was infectious. I hadn't been out on a night like this for ages. I shoved my way to the bar and grabbed a stool, getting comfortable. Not interrupting anything, am I? I asked with a sly smile. Your sister was just telling me stories about your work, Thea said, laughing lightly. I cringed. Oh shit, that's never good. I eyed Thea. But what about some stories about her? Thea gave me a condescending look. Like what? She asked, assuming safety in the knowledge that her life was rather uneventful these days. I grinned conspiratorially and leant closer to Thea, my voice a stage whisper. This one time, when we were 14, we snuck down to a rave down the street. Thea slammed a hand over my mouth, her face white, her eyes wide with embarrassment. No way. She cried out as I tried to pull her hands away from my face, still laughing. You promised. That's not fair. I pushed her off. Hey, you started it when you sacrificed me to chat up a pretty lady. Thea laughed as she blushed. There was a very tame version of the sibling pushing and fighting that we used to do when we were kids. I was about to give in when the music disappeared and the whole club went black. Silence fell for a long minute before anyone started to yell out complaints in the void that was once booming music. The pathetic sounds of their voices in such a huge open space was eerie by comparison. I switched to my other sight and looked around. The whole place was in blackout. I thought Shaky would have had a backup generator, but nothing seemed to be coming online. Jasper's voice called out over the din. Okay, just chill. We'll get the party pumping again. Hang on a moment. Fia's hands dropped to her side. She looked around the room. She was anxious all of a sudden. I could hear her sniffing, smelling the air. She was on high alert. Even in her current form, her senses were miles better than anyone else here. What's up? I said, leaning close into her. She bent over and sniffed my jacket and hair, then the scent in the air again. What's she doing? Thea asked, her vision not impeded by the lack of light. She's, I tried to think of an explanation. Thea wasn't keen on letting people know what she was. She held up her hand, halting my stumbling explanation. I can smell you from earlier. What? I didn't understand at first. I can smell the sewer, the reek you brought back. Too late, I realized what she meant. There was the sound of something climbing in the chains and rigging that hung from the ceiling. We looked up. High in the dark, I could see energy signatures moving, more than a dozen humanoid figures crawling like spiders upside down, descending on the hapless crowd below. Fuck me. Why couldn't there just have been the three? Thank you for listening to Cyphers Edge. Subscribe so as not to miss future episodes. Script and narration by J.J. Brandis. Music was provided by Kayor McLeish. Copyright J.J. Brandis 2024.